Michael Blau. As a follow-up to my question last week about worksheets and auditing, sometimes an auditor is required to create a new PC folder, usually because additional space is needed or a folder was damaged in some way. Many auditors take the opportunity to express artistic or verbal talent in creating a folder. There are many impressive and interesting-looking folders, often having humorous phrases, name variations, or even caricatures. It's always in good taste. Did you notice that in your time? All right, thanks for this question, Michael. And for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about with folders and worksheets, in Scientology, when you go in for auditing, which is their equivalent of counseling, even though I use that term very loosely, when you're going in for the Scientology processes, the auditor, the one who's administering the procedures, keeps a running record of what's going on in the session. And I detailed that last week in talking about the worksheets. Well, the worksheets go into a folder. The folder is a manila legal size folder. It's not colored, it's just plain manila. And your name and the date the folder was started and the number of the folder, because you're going to have multiple folders when you're involved in Scientology. When I left, I had over 50. I think I had about 60 or some odd folders. So you can accumulate quite a few as you get more and more auditing. And these worksheets are kept of the sessions, and they can get kind of thick. I've seen worksheets for a single session that ran over 100 pages of handwritten, the auditors were just flying away, keeping the worksheets. Inside the PC folder, the pre-clear PC is the person who's getting auditing. Inside that folder are all those worksheets, but also are other administrative forms and technical documents and stuff about you and your progress in auditing. For example, on the inside cover of the folder, there's a binder clip which clips a bunch of stuff together. There's a folder summary in there that gives a little summary, a little box. It's a legal sheet of paper divided in two, and they kind of keep a little summary of all the auditing you've ever received by date and how long the session was and basically what was covered in the session. So that's your summary of the session, but then the worksheets are the running record of the session that give all the details of it. So between these two things, you can quickly see what kind of auditing the person's had and what happened in the auditing. When a new folder is created, that's also marked on the folder summary. So this is all, and then the folder summary itself, when you make a new folder, it and all of the other stuff gets moved over to the next folder. So there's a whole little procedure to this. It's all documented. It's very technical. I mean, they actually pay a lot of attention to this in the world of Scientology. This is all part of the administration of auditing. So around the, now, Michael, you and I are both, for old school Scientologists. When we, 70s, 80s, 90s, we were involved in Scientology. And back then, folders were hand-drawn. So you would write the name of the person and the date the folder started and the number. And you would also write that on the binding of the folder, because the folders are stacked in closets, and you can see by looking at the sides of the folders, whose folders is whose. And some people would get very artistic in creating these folders. They would use colored markers, or they would use two markers, do a little, make it look like the person's name had shadow underneath it. It was kind of a fancy sort of highlighter I saw used one time to kind of create this sort of 3D effect with the lettering. So, and sometimes little pictures. I remember one time there was a guy who's was really into flying. So I created a PC folder for him, and I drew a picture of a plane with a little pilot in there waving, and it was not well received. And what ended up happening is Scientology internationally actually kind of cracked down on doing stuff like that and standardized all the folders at one point. And this was, I believe this was in the early 90s, before I actually got in the Sea Org. These instructions came down, and what they said was all folders are to be very utilitarian looking, basically, and they were to be stamped. The important thing was these stamps, and this was a legal OSA requirement that the stamp had to say on it. All the orgs had to get a stamp that said, confidential confessional, priest penitent privilege only, or file, priest penitent privilege file, authorized personnel only, something, it said something like that. And this was a legal requirement that was supposed to be able to keep prying eyes like those of the FBI. If they were to raid a church, they were supposed to not be able to look in these folders because of this stamp, right? Well, I don't know if that's a legal argument that actually holds water or not, but we were required to put these stamps on all the folders we had. And then what ended up happening was a company, I think a Scientologist, because I don't think this was internally done by the Sea Org, but somebody started creating pre-printed folders. And they started getting barcoded and computerized. And there was a computer tracking system that was created in order to log every single folder in existence. And you can imagine when you're dealing with, like in Los Angeles or in Clearwater, when you have thousands of people over the years coming through these places, you end up with thousands, even hundreds of thousands of folders. And they're thick. I mean, some of these folders get to be about 3-4 inches high before you make a new one. And like I said, you could have a person like me in for 20, 25, 30 years, 60, 70, 80. I've seen 200 folders. I mean, some people have a lot of folders. So they have warehouses that they have to rent where they keep these things, or purchase buildings where they store PC folders. And there are warehouses of these in Los Angeles and in Clearwater, Florida, and everywhere else there's a Sea Org base. And the bigger Scientology city-level churches also sometimes have to go out and rent storage space to hold all the damn folders that they're responsible for. Because you can't ever, ever, ever throw away a PC folder. You don't destroy them. You don't throw them away. You don't shred them. Never. Even mine. Suppressed people, right? People who are declared suppressive, they don't get rid of their folders. They very much hold on to those folders, because the folders are where all the blackmail material is that we're always talking about. When somebody gets declared suppressive, and they're gonna, if they go make trouble, like me or Leah or Mike or anybody who was in Scientology and goes out and starts making noise, they pull all the folders and they go through them page by page, and they look for every single mistake, problem, issue, unresolved complaint, unresolved immorality, right? Criminal activity that the person has talked about that they've been involved in, drug use. I mean, it's all in there. You'd be amazed at some of the stuff that people have said that goes in those folders. I mean, everything and anything you can imagine, it's in there. So they go through all those, and that's where they find all that material that they use to create those hate websites and stuff like that. It comes straight out of all these folders. So this is kind of the importance of these folders. And Michael, you only asked about the creative, artistic, making of these folders. Well, that pretty much all got knocked out when these folders were all standardized and stamped and approved and all of that. I could go into some more detail about it, but I think it would be kind of boring for most people. That's basically the gist of it with these things. And the thing about these folders and files are that they are not the individual's property. And you actually sign legal documents that specifically state that the folders and all the information in it and everything you've put there is actually the property of the Church of Scientology. And so you don't get them. And I think there's been one or two court cases where PC folders have been gotten back from the church. I think they were redacted in the cases where that happened. The church, went through and shredded some stuff in them, or cut stuff out, or vetted them, as they say. And but that's how it is. So all this stuff it's not like when you leave Scientology or after you've left, you can just call and say, hey, I want my folders, because they're not yours. And that is one of the biggest dangers about Scientology, is that you're confessing all this stuff and telling them these things, and it's not even your property. So anyway, there's some more information for you about that.